"Dad, you're going to miss your train," Clifford used to say on the mornings he was still living at home. That was back when things in the Coleman household felt stable, or at least that's what Richard Coleman believed. He was a man who thrived on routine, from the scratch of the alarm clock at 6:30 a.m. to the final kiss on Mary's cheek before he left for the station. For 20 years, Richard had built this life: a reliable commute, steady work as a data analyst in the city, 2 kids, Clifford and his younger sister, who was away at college, and a beautiful wife who had once been an accomplished pianist. Every day, as he sat on the train to the city, Richard smiled to himself when it passed his street. There was his clean 2-story home, that neatly trimmed lawn, those white columns on the porch. Above all, there was Mary, usually on the balcony, sipping coffee in her silk robe. 40 years old, but still radiant, Mary had a graceful beauty. Rich brown hair, a slim figure, and a calm elegance that he found mesmerizing. God, I'm lucky, Richard used to think every single morning, but one seemingly minor hiccup, helping a little boy rescue a kitten from a storm drain, threw him off his schedule. It led him to catch a later train, the one that arrived in front of his house roughly 15 minutes after his usual. And that day, everything he understood about his life collapsed in an instant. As the train slid by, he naturally glanced toward his home's big bay windows. He expected to see Mary leaning on the balcony railing or perhaps straightening the curtains. Instead, he saw something that didn't make sense. Mary, pressed up against the glass from the inside, her back bare, her arms raised, her palms splayed against the window, and behind her, a young man, way too young to be anything but a college kid. The sight was so graphic that Richard felt as though the air had been sucked out of the train. He stared, transfixed, while his stomach lurched. "No, I can't be Mary," he whispered under his breath, nails digging into the seat until his knuckles turned white. He felt dizzy, like the train had derailed. The young man's hands were on Mary's hips, pulling her close. Mary's head tilted back in an all-too-familiar expression of pleasure. For the first time in his life, Richard wished he could close his eyes and unsee something, but he couldn't. The next few seconds played out like a twisted, slow-motion clip in his mind. Mary's lips parted, her body arching, the man leaning over her neck. Then, in a flash, the train rolled on, and their house vanished from view. Richard felt cold sweat trickle down his temples. His phone was in his pocket. He stared at it, half in a daze, torn between calling Mary this instant to demand an explanation and telling himself that he must have seen it wrong. But deep down, he knew what he'd seen was real. His mind churned the entire ride into the city. When he finally arrived at his desk, he spent hours staring at spreadsheets. They blurred, morphing into hateful shapes and numbers that had no meaning. Coworkers asked if he felt okay, and he forced a hollow smile, muttering something about lack of sleep. That night, Mary greeted him with the same warm smile, the same gentle kiss on his cheek, the same, "Dinner's almost ready." The dissonance nearly made him sick. He looked at her glowing face and wondered, how can she act so normal after doing that? He almost confronted her right there, but the words got stuck in his throat. Something in Mary's calm, welcoming expression made him hesitate. Maybe he was scared of what she'd say. Maybe he clung to the hope that it wasn't real. So he ate dinner in silence, the taste turning rancid in his mouth. All the while, Mary seemed completely unbothered, as though she'd spent her day teaching sweet little piano lessons in her living room, instead of hooking up with a young man by the bedroom window. Still reeling, Richard decided he had to confirm what he saw. He repeated the train later trick a few days later, letting his usual train pass. He paced the platform like a man waiting for his own execution. Then the next train arrived, and he took it, heart hammering. As his house came into view, he braced for some horrifying sight. But the curtains were open, and Mary was simply at the piano, alone, her posture poised and graceful. No suspicious shadows, no movement from behind. Nothing. He sagged with relief. Maybe it was all a random, bizarre misunderstanding. Maybe on that dreadful morning she'd been leaning at an odd angle. Or maybe it was some bizarre optical illusion. He'd let hope crack through his despair that entire day. But the next time he tried it, 2 days after, he saw a scene that obliterated every last trace of doubt. Mary, again with a young man, only this time in a different window. It looked as if they were halfway undressing each other. Mary's face flushed. The timing was so identical to that previous moment that Richard realized it was a pattern. It wasn't just one affair or one fling. It was a routine. He forced himself to look away as the train rumbled by. Inside, it felt like something cracked in his chest, a suffocating pressure. By the time he arrived at the city station, he was trembling. How many times had he been riding the earlier train, gazing at his home with fondness, while his wife carried on a hidden life? Jesus, he whispered to himself. Why is she doing this? At work, he couldn't function. It took him 5 times as long to accomplish anything. He messed up basic tasks, needing to reread emails or recheck numbers. All he could think of was Mary's face twisted in pleasure with a stranger's hands on her. By that evening, he'd resolved to watch her more closely at home, not to confront her directly yet, but to observe. Over the next week, he saw Mary rummaging through her closet for outfits more provocative than she'd worn in years. Pencil skirts hugging her hips, sheer blouses with multiple buttons undone. She'd hum around the kitchen, checking her phone frequently, occasionally smiling or giggling to herself at incoming texts. The vibe in the house was off. One afternoon, he overheard part of a phone call. Mary's voice had a light, teasing lilt to it. "You better not be late. We only have 2 hours before my husband gets home." "Right, but don't park out front, just in case." She laughed softly, then lowered her voice. Richard, standing in the hallway with his heart pounding, realized she was openly scheduling her hookups with absolutely no sign of guilt. She even seemed excited by the secrecy. "She's not even trying to hide this carefully," he thought, appalled. "It's like she thinks I'm a fool." That night, Mary cooked a big pasta dinner. She asked sweetly about Richard's day, rubbed his shoulders while he sat at the table, and gave every impression of being a doting wife. Richard discovered her smugness wasn't just personal arrogance. Mary's mother, Eleanor, came to visit for a weekend. Eleanor was a widow with a sharp tongue and a well-preserved look for her age. Silver hair pinned back, expensive perfume always clinging to her clothes. She seemed polite enough with Richard, but behind that pleasant facade, she had a manipulative gleam in her eye. After dinner one night, Richard excused himself, claiming fatigue, but he lingered outside the living room door. He heard Mary and her mother's voices carrying softly. "It's thrilling, you know? I feel so alive. I have these men practically lining up for lessons. They're younger, eager, and they admire me. It's like I'm in my 20s again," Mary said in a hushed, excited tone. But be careful, dear. Men can get suspicious when they see they're being covered," Eleanor replied. "Richard's too busy, too naive. He's never home during the day. And besides, I'm careful. I don't let them stay long. Just an hour or two, and then they're gone," Mary said. "I remember your father being oblivious for quite a while, but not forever," Eleanor said with a dry chuckle. "Hide your tracks. Use separate accounts or a burner phone if you must. You don't want this blowing up in your face." A wave of sickness rolled through Richard as he realized that Mary's own mother was condoning and even coaching her on how to cheat. His knuckles whitened around the doorframe. So this was the environment Mary came from. He'd had no idea. "Don't worry, I have it all handled. If Richard even got a hint, I could just sweet-talk my way out of it. He still sees me like I'm the same fragile pianist he rescued from that horrible first marriage. As if I can do no wrong," Mary said. "Well, as long as you're happy, dear, just do me a favor and keep it discreet. No need to drag the rest of the family into your extracurriculars," Eleanor said. They shared a low laugh. Richard's vision blurred with rage. He felt like a stranger in his own house, overhearing a pair of conspirators. Yet he forced himself to slip away quietly, heading upstairs with a swirl of fury and heartbreak in his stomach. "She thinks I'm too naive to figure it out." That was the night Richard decided, "I'm going to take my time. I'm going to wreck everything she's built in the shadows. Because if he confronted her too soon, she might just spin a story or possibly blackmail him emotionally." He wanted a plan that left no escape. Clifford Coleman had no plans to visit home that Friday, but the dorm washing machines were busted, and the lure of a real meal, plus a chance to grab some clean clothes, was enough to warrant the short drive home. He didn't text ahead. He never had to. This was still his house, wasn't it? He pushed open the front door, calling out like he always did. "Mom? Dad? Yo. Anyone home?" No answer. He dropped his backpack by the door and stepped into the hallway, expecting to smell pasta or hear the familiar clink of dishes. Instead, he caught hushed voices and a weird giggle from the living room. He turned the corner and froze in place. His mother, his own mother, was straddling some kid on the couch, her blouse unbuttoned halfway down, hands on the guy's chest, her mouth close to his ear, whispering and laughing like some teenager at prom. The dude looked young, like his age. Maybe younger. Maybe someone from campus. "What the duck?" Clifford said under his breath. Mary jerked back like she'd been electrocuted. "Clifford, what the hell? Why are you here?" Clifford's face had gone white. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The guy scrambled up, fumbling with his shirt. "Yo, I didn't know, man." "Shut up," Clifford snapped. "Don't even speak." Mary was buttoning up in a panic, but her tone sharpened the moment her top was closed. "You should have called before barging in like that," she snapped. Clifford's voice cracked from the sheer shock. Are you seriously cheating on Dad? With that kid? What the duck is wrong with you?" "Don't you dare talk to me like that," Mary growled, flipping the switch from flustered to furious. "You have no idea what goes on in a marriage. You think it's all flowers and kisses? Grow up." "Unreal," Clifford muttered, stepping back. "You're actually trying to justify this?" The young man was already halfway to the door. I'm just gonna, I'm out, man. Sorry." Clifford didn't even look at him. "You better hope I never see you again, bro. For your sake." But he did look, long enough to burn the guy's face into memory. The slick hair, that smug little stammer, the way he looked away like Clifford wasn't even a threat. That face, that guy. A classmate? He'd find out. He'd hunt the bastard down if he had to scan the whole student directory. The guy fled. The door slammed. Now, it was just mother and son, and the silence between them was molten. Clifford stepped closer, fists clenched. "Dad loves you. He works his ass off every day to give you this life, this house, everything. And you're just, what, spreading your legs for randos on the couch?" Mary's eyes narrowed into cold slits. "Watch your mouth, Clifford." "I saw you," he barked. "Don't try to gaslight me. Jesus, Mom! You don't get to judge me, you spoiled little brat," she shot back. "You're a kid. You've never been married. You've never had to sacrifice anything. You don't get to play the victim here," he hissed. "You just got caught, that's all. You're not some oppressed wife. You're a lying piece of sh—" "Enough," she roared. "You want to keep talking like that, keep playing hero for Daddy? Then go ahead. But know this, if you open your big mouth, your college fund's gone. That car you're driving, gone. I'll shut it all down, Clifford. You'll be flipping burgers at KFC until you're 30. Clifford blinked. "What the hell did you just say to me?" "You heard me," she said, stepping in close, eyes blazing. "Try me, and I'll make sure you regret it. You tell your father, and I will ruin you. You'll be broke, living on ramen, trying to find Wi-Fi in a Starbucks parking lot. I promise you that." Clifford stared at her, stunned. He couldn't recognize the woman in front of him. This wasn't the mom who packed his lunches, who sang in the kitchen. This was someone else, cold, calculated, poisonous. "You're blackmailing your own son?" he said, voice low. "I'm protecting what's mine," she spat. "You're disgusting," he said. "I don't even know who the hell you are anymore." "I'm someone who knows how to survive," she said, brushing past him. "Something you'll never understand with your coddled little life. Go cry to your dorm buddies. But if you tell your father, Clifford, we're done. I will cut you off. That's not a threat. That's a promise." She stormed up the stairs like she'd just won something, leaving her son in the dim living room, his world upside down. Clifford stood there for a long time, jaw clenched, fists shaking. Rage churned in his gut, sick and hot. And not just at her, that guy. The smirking, clueless, barely older than me guy. He wasn't innocent in this. He knew. No way he didn't. He walked in here like he'd been here before. Comfortable, familiar. Like he belonged in Clifford's house. If he was some student from his class, then Clifford would find him. He'd find him, and then he'd decide how much damage he deserved. Maybe it'd be public, expose him for sleeping with a married woman. Or maybe it'd be personal, something quiet, permanent. "You humiliated me in my own home," Clifford thought, staring at the door that guy had vanished through. "You laughed with my mother on my couch. You're gonna wish you never met her. You want war, Mom? Fine, you both get it." He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just turned, grabbed his backpack, and walked out the door without another word. As he drove back to campus, his knuckles white around the steering wheel, one thing became crystal clear. He was going to destroy her. Not with fists, not with yelling, but with cold, merciless planning. And if that punk thought he could walk away clean, he hadn't met the real Clifford Coleman yet. The house was quiet. almost too quiet for how heavy the air felt. Richard Coleman sat alone in his study, hunched over a small desk lamp, his reading glasses sliding low on his nose. His fingers hovered over a legal pad filled with dates, initials, and plate numbers. His phone rested beside him with an open photo gallery of time-stamped snapshots, most taken through the blinds or from the upstairs window. Mary laughing at the door, Mary letting someone inside. The same car parked out front again and again. He didn't look like a man obsessed. He looked like a man holding himself together with thread. Then a soft knock broke the stillness. "Yeah?" Richard called, his voice rough from disuse. The door creaked open slowly. Clifford stepped in, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, dark circles under his eyes. He looked older somehow, tired in a way Richard didn't recognize. "Hey, Clifford shifted awkwardly. "Can we talk?" Richard straightened slightly, lowering his pen. He subtly covered the notepad with a folder. "Yeah, of course. Everything okay?" Clifford closed the door behind him. "Not really," he said quietly. Richard's brows pinched. "Something happened?" Clifford stood still for a moment, rubbing his hands together before speaking. "I saw Mom," he finally said. "Like, with someone on the couch a few weeks ago?" Richard blinked. "You... what?" "I walked in," Clifford continued. "Unannounced. I just came home to grab some stuff, and she was with some guy, shirt half off, laughing, touching him. It was..." He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. "I couldn't believe it." Richard didn't respond right away. His hands curled slightly on the desk, knuckles pale. "And when she saw me," Clifford went on, voice getting tighter, "she didn't even try to explain. She just got pissed, told me I was a kid. Said I didn't understand marriage. Then she threatened me." Richard looked up at him sharply. "Threatened you?" "Yeah," Clifford nodded, eyes flaring. "Said if I told you, she'd cut off my college money. Said I'd be flipping burgers at KFC until I'm old. I swear to God, Dad. She meant it." Richard's lips parted like he wanted to say something, but he just stared at the floor. "She threatened you," he repeated after a long beat. His voice was low, hollow. "Jesus Christ." "I didn't know what to do," Clifford muttered, rubbing his face. "I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure if you already knew, or if it would just blow everything up. But I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." Richard sat back in his chair, letting out a long, quiet breath. His eyes looked glassy. "I know," he said softly. Clifford blinked. "Wait, you know?" Richard reached for the folder and opened it slowly, sliding it toward Clifford. "I've been collecting proof, watching, taking pictures, logs, phone records, all of it." Clifford stared at the folder. "How long?" "Months," Richard said, his voice like gravel. "I saw her the first time from the train. Wrong time, wrong window. And everything came apart after that." Clifford leaned against the desk, silent for a moment. "Why didn't you say anything?" Richard let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "What was I going to say, son? Hey, guess what? I think your mom's screwing college kids while I'm at work." I had to be sure. And I knew if I confronted her too early, she'd lie, cry, manipulate. He shook his head. "No, I needed facts. I needed something that holds up in court." Clifford looked at him with something between admiration and heartbreak. "You were just living with her? Knowing all this?" "I wasn't living with her," Richard said bitterly. "I was living next to a stranger wearing her skin." Silence stretched between them again. Clifford finally spoke, voice harder now. "She's not just cheating on you, Dad. She's doing it like it's a game. Like she enjoys the thrill of hiding it. She even said she could talk her way out of it if you ever caught her." Richard's jaw clenched, a vein twitching near his temple. "Of course she did." "And the guy I saw?" Clifford added. "I think he goes to my school. I'm going to find him. I already remember his face." Richard looked up, his eyes dark. "Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," Clifford said, but something in his tone hinted otherwise. They sat in silence for a long moment, then Clifford gestured at the evidence. "So, what's your plan?" Richard tapped the folder once. "I want her to confess, not just slip up or say something dumb. I want her to say it, on tape. I want a confession so airtight no lawyer can weasel her out of it. Then I'll take it to court. She'll lose the house, the money, everything she's clung to like it makes her somebody." Clifford nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of it. "You're really going to take her down." "She made this choice," Richard said, his voice steady but shaking beneath. "She lied to me. Lied to you, put our whole family on the line, and then she threatened you just to save her ass? She doesn't deserve mercy." Clifford looked at his father for a long time. The man looked exhausted, hollowed out, but there was steel under the pain. "I'm in," Clifford said quietly. "Whatever you need." Richard met his son's eyes. For a second, they weren't just father and son. They were survivors. "I'm sorry you had to see her like that," Richard said, voice cracking slightly. Clifford nodded. "I'm sorry you did." Richard stood and reached for his son's shoulder, gripping it gently. "You don't deserve any of this, Cliff. None of it. Neither do you." There was no dramatic hug, no outpouring of tears, just a quiet, wordless bond forming in the wreckage. They weren't just father and son anymore. They were co-conspirators in a war Mary never saw coming. Several days later, Richard received a call while still in the city, leaving him stunned. Linda from Haven Medical Center. "Mr. Coleman, we tried to reach Mary, but she isn't answering. We just wanted to let her know her recent tests came back clear. She's perfectly healthy." Richard was about to say, "That's good to hear," but he froze. A new idea flashed in his mind. If Mary didn't realize she was perfectly healthy, he could manipulate her into thinking otherwise. He suppressed a bitter laugh. Perfect timing. So Mary had gone for some random tests, maybe a routine check, and now the doctors were trying to give her good news. She didn't pick up, possibly because she was busy with her flings or ignoring unknown numbers. After a tense breath, he thanked Linda, hung up, and stared at his phone. A realization settled. I can make her think she's dying. It sounded extreme, even cruel. But an odd sense of poetic justice spurred him on. If she believed her time was running out, he suspected that arrogant facade might crack wide open. He started by blocking the Haven Medical Center's number on Mary's phone. One morning, while she stepped into the hallway, he casually picked up her phone, saw the text from the hospital. "Mrs. Coleman, please call us about your negative results," and deleted it. Then he went into the phone settings and blocked them. Gone. Now Mary would never hear the real all clear. Next, he used a cheap burner phone to call Mary. "Hello?" Mary answered warily. "Yes, good morning. Am I speaking with Mrs. Coleman?" Richard forced his voice into a carefully modulated tone that sounded like a polite, slightly older man. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Dr. Harrison from Haven Medical. We've been trying to reach you regarding your results. I'm afraid we need further testing to confirm something rather concerning." The silence on Mary's end was instant. He could practically feel her panic. She'd always been a mild hypochondriac. He didn't have to say anything specific, just enough to spook her into thinking it might be cancer or another degenerative disease. After a minute of circling dialogue, he ended with, "We'll reach out again with more information, Mrs. Coleman. In the meantime, be on the lookout for unusual symptoms like skin irritation, extreme fatigue, dizziness." That was all it took. Mary grew quiet, murmuring, Okay, thank you, doctor." The next day, he began a series of subtle tricks to convince her that symptoms were emerging. A dusting of cayenne in her favorite blouse to cause itching. A light drizzle of colorless laxative in her coffee. The result? She started feeling off physically. Mild rashes, occasional stomach cramps, random waves of fatigue. "Richard," she said one morning, "have you noticed anything weird about my skin?" "You look a bit red," he replied softly, with just the right undertone of concern. "Maybe it's an allergic reaction." She bit her lip, anxiety dancing in her eyes. "I don't know. The doctor said something about skin irritation being a symptom." Richard shrugged sympathetically. "I'm sure it's nothing, but if it gets worse, maybe we should call them back." Mary nodded, eyes distant. Despite her growing anxiety, Mary tried to maintain her fling schedule. She craved the adrenaline and validation that came from seducing these younger men. One typical afternoon lesson saw Mary greeting a muscular sophomore named Liam at the door. She wore a tight blouse and a pencil skirt that accentuated her figure. "I'm so glad you could make it," she purred. "You look tense. Rough day on campus?" Liam grinned. "Yeah, midterms. I could use a break." Mary guided him to the piano. She played a few arpeggios, then perched next to him on the bench, letting her thigh press against his. "Let's see if you remember the scale I taught you last time," she teased, though her eyes were on his lips rather than the keyboard. Within minutes, the lesson devolved into flirtation, Mary's fingers drifting across his shoulders, and soon they were kissing. The piano sat forgotten. the lid half lowered. Mary's heart pounded with the thrill of it, just as it had with the last half-dozen students. She relished the power of it, the sense of being wanted. But then, out of nowhere, Mary felt a wave of crampy nausea, the mild laxative at work. She pulled back with a frown, hand on her stomach. I'm sorry, give me a second. Rushing to the bathroom, she cursed softly. It worried her. What if something really was wrong with her body? You okay? Liam asked through the door. I'm fine, she snapped, irritated. She composed herself, freshened up, and returned, forcing a playful smile. She refused to let some mysterious sickness spoil her fun. But the seed of worry had been planted. Mary confided in her mother once more, this time with an edge of fear in her voice. Mom, I've been feeling weird lately, constant itching, weird stomach issues. Maybe I'm just run down, but the doctor said something about more tests. I'm freaked out. Well, you've always been a little dramatic with health, Eleanor said dismissively. It's probably stress. You're juggling a lot. Your husband, all these affairs, your new adult students. Remember to keep them separate, Mary. If you slip up, Richard might find out. It's that stress that's giving you these symptoms, dear. I know, but I'm just worried. I can't lose everything. I gave up so much to be with Richard in the first place, and I'm not done living. I can't let a disease or a scandal end this. You'll be fine, Eleanor insisted. Just stay organized. If you sense Richard's suspicion, pivot. Act super loving for a while. Men are easy to fool. Mary let out a laugh that sounded forced. Right. Thanks, Mom. She hung up and stared at the phone, heart pounding. Could it be just stress? She tried to reassure herself, but the dryness in her mouth and the itching in her arms told her something was off. She decided she'd better schedule new tests. But every time she tried to call the medical center, the line wouldn't ring through. Some glitch, or so she thought. Meanwhile, Clifford was investigating the identity of one of Mary's flings. He discovered that Zach, a classmate from his econ lectures, was not only hooking up with Mary, but also bragging about this older woman he was seeing to a few friends. Clifford's blood boiled. He confronted Zach privately. Dude, he said, cornering him near the campus library. I know who your older woman is. Zach gave a cocky grin. Oh yeah, so, she's amazing, man. Clifford's jaw clenched. That's my mother. Zach's face fell instantly. He stuttered. Oh, crap. Shut up, Clifford snapped. You keep your mouth shut. I don't want you messing with my family anymore. Zach tried to laugh it off. Look, man, your mom's the one who started it. She's crazy hot and... Before he could finish, Clifford shoved him against a wall, anger crackling in his voice. Don't you dare talk about her that way. You're a scumbag. Stay away from my house. Zach shoved back with an uneasy grin. Fine, but good luck controlling her. She's the one who calls me. Clifford bit back the urge to punch him right there. Instead, he turned and walked away, mind burning with possibilities of how to make him pay. Richard decided it was time to shock Mary with a fake medical emergency, forcing her to believe her worst fears were real. He orchestrated a scenario at Mary's favorite cafe, where she regularly had lunch with her friend Lisa. He waited outside the cafe in a black hoodie, baseball cap pulled low, scanning through the window. He watched as Mary and Lisa chatted. When the timing was perfect, he slipped inside, maneuvered near their table, and managed to accidentally jostle Lisa so her purse spilled. Mary bent down to help pick up scattered lipsticks and keys, distracted for just the few seconds Richard needed. He dropped a mild sedative pill into Mary's drink. Then he apologized awkwardly and disappeared back out the door, pivoting around the corner. A few minutes later, Mary began to look pale, sweaty, losing focus. Lisa grew alarmed. Mary, are you okay? Mary's eyes fluttered. She mumbled something about feeling dizzy. On cue, Richard re-entered in a paramedic uniform, one he'd rented, and a hired accomplice in a matching outfit. Ma'am, he said in a clipped, businesslike tone, we got a call about a potential fainting. Is this the patient? Lisa, frantic, nodded. Yes, please help her! Mary was too disoriented to realize the paramedic's voice was oddly familiar. She let them load her onto a gurney and whisk her into a waiting van. The entire cafe believed they were actual medical professionals responding to an emergency. Once inside the van, Mary drifted in and out of consciousness, seeing just enough of Richard's masked face to furrow her brow in hazy confusion. He kept his face partially turned, speaking in a stern voice. We'll get you to the hospital. Stay calm. She blacked out before they arrived at a small, staged clinic room, a place Richard had set up with cheap medical equipment borrowed from a shady supplier. The hush of the overhead lights, the beep of a heart monitor, the swirl of antiseptic smell was enough to fool her in her half-conscious state. A cooperating doctor in a white coat, another old acquaintance of Richard's, well paid to keep quiet, told Mary she had a suspicious degenerative disease that needed more tests. The word terminal might have been dropped once or twice, enough to lodge terror in her mind. When Mary came to, groggy and terrified, she saw Richard by her bedside, looking deeply worried. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, voice trembling at the edges. "We'll fight this." He explained that the doctors suspected something serious, that they'd run initial tests, and it didn't look good. She felt her throat constrict. "No, oh God, no, I can't," she stammered, tears rolling down her cheeks. Richard stroked her hair tenderly. "I'll take you home. You can recover there. I'll do whatever it takes." Mary clung to him, sobbing. For the first time since he discovered her cheating, he felt a raw sense of power. She was leaning on him, reliant on him. She never imagined he was the architect of her entire ordeal. After a theatrical discharge from that makeshift clinic, Richard drove her home, wrapped her in a blanket, and began turning the house into a sweltering environment. He cranked the thermostat so the air felt oppressive, like she had a constant fever. He timed small doses of sedatives to keep her weak, occasionally dizzy. Now Mary found herself canceling her usual piano lessons with those men, texting them half-apologetic messages. "Not feeling well? Can't meet." Most of them quickly lost interest or simply moved on, not wanting to be involved with a sick older woman. Her phone felt quiet, deserted, except for the occasional well-meaning text from a friend or from Lisa. Meanwhile, Mary tried to call Haven Medical Center to schedule follow-up tests, but the number was still blocked. She tried an alternative line that got her stuck in an automated loop. She grew panicky, suspecting her calls were being misdirected or something. She didn't realize Richard was behind it all. The air in the campus music building always felt a little too still at night. The halls were dim, quiet except for the soft hum of old fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the wooden floor. Clifford sat alone in the corner of practice room C, facing the old Steinway. His fingers hovered over the keys, tapping out low, deliberate notes like the soundtrack to something you don't want to see coming. His jaw was tight, his eyes blank, cold. He'd been waiting 30 minutes. When Zach finally strolled in, sweats on, gym bag over his shoulder, earbuds dangling, he barely acknowledged Clifford at first. "You wanted to talk?" Zach said, his tone smug, almost annoyed. "Look, I already told you, I'm out of your mom's life. She stopped texting. I figured it was over." Clifford didn't look up right away. He pressed a few more keys. A dissonant, ugly little chord echoed in the tight room. Zach shifted. "You're not seriously mad about it still, are you?" Clifford finally looked up, voice calm, too calm. "You slept with my mother, Zach." Zach exhaled a dry laugh. "Dude, come on, she came on to me. I didn't even know she was your mom at first. I mean, Jesus, man, she didn't act married." Clifford rose from the piano bench slowly, cracking his knuckles as he stood. "You bragged about it." Zach blinked. "What?" "You bragged about it," Clifford repeated, stepping closer. "To your friends. People heard you. You told them you were hooking up with a hot older woman. Wild, you called her, called it your piano practice. Remember that?" Zach scoffed, but there was a flicker of tension now. "Man, I didn't even know she was. This isn't my fault." "Oh, it's not your fault," Clifford echoed, voice rising just slightly. "You just happened to end up on my couch with my mother, laughing, making yourself comfortable in the house my dad built." Zach rolled his eyes. "Okay, yeah, awkward situation, whatever. But if your mom's miserable in her marriage, that's not on me, that's between them." "Stop talking," Clifford said suddenly. Zach froze. Clifford stepped even closer. "You disrespected my father. You disrespected me. You turned my life into a joke." Zach's eyes flicked toward the door. "Bro, I told you, I'm out, done, okay? I already ghosted her. I'm not looking for trouble." Clifford nodded slowly. "Good." Then, without warning, he spun and slammed the Steinway lid down on Zach's hand. The sound wasn't loud. It was sharp, wood on bone. Zach screamed instantly. "Ah, duck!" He dropped to the floor, yanking his hand back. His fingers bent at weird angles. One was already swelling. Clifford just stood there, unmoving. Zach looked up, face twisted in pain and shock. "You psycho, what the duck?" Clifford crouched in front of him, eyes cold. "That's for humiliating me. For walking into my house like you belonged there. For touching my mother like she's just some story to laugh about in a dorm. Zach cradled his hand, sweat breaking out across his forehead. Jesus, I think it's broken. You're lucky that's all I did, Clifford said, voice low. And I swear to God, Zach, if I ever hear you mention her again, or you so much as glance in my direction, I'll make this look like foreplay. Zach whimpered, his voice high-pitched and ragged. Okay, man, I got it. I'm gone. I'm done. I mean it, Clifford snapped, stepping back. You speak her name again, and I'll finish what I started. Zach struggled to stand, still clutching his hand to his chest. He backed toward the door, breathing fast. You're ducking nuts, man. No, Clifford said. You are, for thinking there wouldn't be consequences. Zach didn't reply. He just stumbled out the door, whimpering, leaving a faint trail of moaning curses behind. The room was silent again, except for the soft humming of the fluorescent lights and the faint echo of the piano lid settling into place. Clifford sat back down at the bench, his chest still heaving from adrenaline. He looked down at the keys and pressed one. A single note rang out, pure and hollow. He stared at it for a long moment. He felt no guilt, not an ounce, not even fear. Only a deep, chilling satisfaction that for the first time since this nightmare started, someone got hurt. And it wasn't him. He told no one, not his dad, not his friends. It was a secret, a dark one. But it made him feel like he finally had control. And for now, that was enough. Back at home, Richard watched Mary sink deeper into despair. She believed she was teetering on the brink of death, or at least losing her health in some unstoppable way. She looked paler, lost weight, scratched at her skin from the phantom rash, and constantly asked Richard if he'd love her no matter what happened. Of course I do, he said, brushing her hair back. But inside, he felt a cold satisfaction. This was only the prelude. He needed her raw, vulnerable, desperate enough that she might pour out her darkest secrets to cleanse her conscience before the end. Late one evening, Mary was alone in the upstairs bedroom. The environment was stifling with heat, the only light coming from flickering candles. She lay half-conscious, wearing a thin nightgown that clung to her clammy skin. Suddenly, she sensed a looming presence, a dark figure in the corner, robed, hooded, silent. She gasped. Who's there? She croaked. The figure took a step forward, candlelight dancing over the edges of black fabric. A voice, distorted, hissed, Mary Coleman, your time is near, but you can still save your soul. Confess your sins. Mary's eyes widened in terror. She believed she was hallucinating or having some near-death vision. She pressed her back against the headboard, tears falling down her cheeks. No, she whispered. No, I don't want to die. The figure demanded a confession. Through sobs, Mary began blurting out the truth she'd hidden, how she had used her piano lessons as a front to meet young men, how many she'd slept with, how she'd done it under Richard's nose. She admitted she'd enjoyed the power, the excitement, the feeling of being desired. She even named names, including Clifford's classmates she'd asked him to introduce. The guilt, the shame, the thrill. She poured it all out in a messy, desperate stream, as if unburdening herself might somehow spare her from death. At that final moment, the hooded figure stepped into the candlelight and slowly pulled back the hood. It was Richard, face pale and eyes burning with a calm, vengeful fury. He reached up and clicked off a small recorder in his hand. Mary's voice died in her throat. She stared at him in paralyzed shock. That's when the closet door behind them opened, revealing Clifford, who'd heard every word. Cliff, Mary croaked, voice cracking. Please, He just stared, expression blank, heartbreak mingling with cold anger. Richard turned to him, voice steady. You heard all that, son? Clifford nodded once. The tension in the room felt thick enough to choke on. Mary tried to speak, but only managed a ragged sob. She realized in that instant she'd doomed herself. Everything was out in the open. All the evidence in Richard's hand. Her illusions of control, her arrogance, her seductive power, they were undone by the man she'd scorned. This, Richard said, lifting the recorder, will be very useful in court. Mary collapsed, hysterical sobs racking her. She pleaded for mercy, for a second chance. But Richard's face was cold. He left her there, weeping in the stifling heat, as he took Clifford's arm and exited the room, quietly closing the door behind them. Mary Coleman sat against the headboard, her robe damp from the feverish heat of the bedroom. The confession had spilled from her mouth just minutes before, every lurid detail of her affairs with younger men, some of them barely older than her own son, Clifford. She'd recounted how she scheduled secret lessons, how she basked in the attention, how she even lied to keep Richard, her husband, in the dark, and it was all recorded. The bedroom was still suffocatingly hot from the thermostat cranked to maximum. The candles that Richard had lit flickered, sending dancing shadows across the walls. The tension was unbearable. Mary felt like she'd stepped into her own nightmare. Richard, her once devoted husband, stood in front of her with an air of quiet wrath. He held the small recording device in his right hand, thumb on the stop button. Just moments earlier, he'd worn a sinister hooded cloak to drive her into a state of panic, making her believe she was facing some grim angel of death. "So this," Richard said quietly, "is what you really think of our marriage." Mary couldn't find the words to answer. She was too busy trying to breathe, trying not to fall apart in front of him. In the corner, their son Clifford loomed in the doorway, having emerged from the closet to listen to his mother's betrayal. His face was pale, lips pressed together. "Mom," Clifford said in a voice thick with disgust, "I heard everything." Mary's eyes darted to him. She wanted to speak, to apologize, but no words came. Clifford simply stood there, arms crossed, a sorrowful anger in his eyes. Richard exhaled, slipping the recorder into his pocket. "Cliff," he said, "thank you for helping me verify the truth." "You're welcome," Clifford managed, though he looked stricken. Mary let out a choked sob. "Please," she whispered, I'm sorry." Her entire body shook, not just from humiliation, but from the knowledge that she had no defense left. She had just destroyed herself with her own confession. Richard's gaze was ice cold. "You're not sorry you did it," he said. "You're sorry we found out, and now you're sorry that your little game is over." He turned to Clifford, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to see the rest of this. Go downstairs, son." Clifford nodded numbly. He gave Mary a final look, an odd mix of hurt, anger, and pity, before heading down the stairs. The moment he was gone, Mary tried to stand, but her knees wobbled, forcing her to clutch the bedpost for support. "Richard," she managed in a shaky voice, "please tell me what's going to happen now." He raised an eyebrow. "Well, Mary, after all the time you've spent turning this house into your private motel, after you threatened our son to keep your secret, after the lies upon lies, I think you know what's coming." He paused. "I'm divorcing you, and by the time I'm done, you'll have nothing. No home, no money, no career, no reputation." Mary clutched a handful of her robe. "Don't do this," she whimpered. "I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish, but can't we work something out?" "Work something out?" His bark of laughter was harsh. "I gave you my entire life, Mary. You decided to gamble it away on cheap thrills. We're finished." And with that, he turned and strode out, leaving Mary alone in that sweltering bedroom, tears streaming down her face. The very next day, Richard contacted an attorney, a skilled man named Dwight Garrett, who specialized in high-stakes divorces. Richard provided Dwight with every shred of evidence: digital photos of the men visiting, phone records, text message logs, timestamps of Mary's suspicious lessons. Most damning of all was the recorded confession in which Mary listed out her liaisons in explicit detail. "You want the short version, Mr. Coleman?" Dwight said, skimming the transcripts. "She's toast. The judge will see the pattern of repeated adultery, plus the moral implications of her sleeping with younger students. If half of these men were actually your son's college peers, that's doubly damning." Richard nodded, arms crossed. "I want full custody of our finances. If the law can't let me cut her off entirely, I at least want to minimize any payout." Dwight studied him carefully. "Understood. Be aware judges sometimes still grant a minimal settlement. But with evidence this strong, Mary's share could be next to nothing." Meanwhile, Mary paced in the upstairs bedroom like a caged animal, her guilt interlaced with panic. Her phone was blocked from calling out, at least to any meaningful numbers. She realized that her entire life's decisions, the manipulations she'd done to keep her fling secret, had come home to roost. On top of that, Richard's calm, methodical approach terrified her more than if he'd screamed. At night, she barely slept, convinced that at any moment he might march in with something worse. But all he did was quietly build his legal case. Within days, Mary received official notice of the divorce petition. A knock on the front door heralded a process server standing on the porch. Mary, forced by Richard to stay home, answered in her wrinkled robe. The process server handed over the envelope with a curt nod. "Mary Coleman, you've been served." In the foyer, Mary leafed through the documents with shaking hands. She spotted references to extreme infidelity, moral turpitude, and the request for the forfeiture of assets. The fear nearly paralyzed her. She looked up to see Richard watching from the base of the stairs, arms folded. "I tried to keep it cordial," he said with a hint of sarcasm. "But given the circumstances, it's going to get ugly." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Richard, can't we talk this through? We built this life together. Don't destroy me." "I'm not destroying you," he replied stonily. "You destroyed us. I'm simply cleaning up the wreckage." Late one afternoon, Clifford came home from his campus dorm to gather some belongings. The tension in the house was palpable. He found Mary in the kitchen, sitting at the table, her eyes red from crying. "Cliff," she said, standing up with a shaky smile. "Honey, please, can we?" He stepped back, arms raised defensively. "Mom, don't. I can't handle this right now." "I know I messed up," Mary pleaded. "I never meant for you to find out or for it to hurt you like this." Clifford shook his head. "So, it was fine as long as I didn't know? That's what you're saying?" She opened her mouth, then shut it again, realizing how awful that sounded. "No, not exactly. I'm just sorry. Can't you forgive me?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "Dad told me how you threatened me if I told him the truth. You realize how twisted that is, Mom?" "I was desperate," Mary said, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Clifford hesitated. A small part of him wanted to comfort her. But the deeper betrayal still burned. "I can't be around you, not after everything I've heard and seen." He grabbed the last of his things. "I'm going back to campus," he muttered. "Dad's a wreck, but I think he'll be okay. I don't even know who you are anymore." Mary stepped forward, tears brimming. "Cliff, please?" But he brushed past her, ignoring the sob that tore from her throat. Moments later, the front door closed, leaving Mary alone, the silence pounding in her ears. The realization that she'd lost her son settled in, and despair clawed at her chest. Months later, the formal hearing took place in a half-crowded family court. The judge was a severe-looking woman who frowned upon reading the summary of Mary's affairs, especially the repeated pattern with multiple younger partners. Dwight Garrett presented the pile of evidence methodically, highlighting Mary's systematic adultery. Mary's own lawyer, some overworked public defender she'd had to settle for, could barely dispute the facts. When the audio recordings of Mary's confession were played, the courtroom felt stifling. Mary's voice, trembling and tearful, enumerated her transgressions. "No further questions, Your Honor," Dwight concluded, letting the damning confessions speak for themselves. Mary sank into her seat, face burning with shame. She spared a glance at Richard, his face unreadable like a stone. Clifford was absent, refusing to attend. Even Mary's mother, Eleanor, did not appear. Everyone had either abandoned her or was too disgusted to show up. In the end, the judge ruled that Mary's repeated infidelity, plus the manipulative nature of her lesson schedule, warranted a severe penalty. The house, the savings, and most of the marital assets went to Richard. The judge went so far as to note, for the record, that Mary's fitness as a caretaker was in question, especially given how she'd threatened her own son. "Divorce granted," the judge announced. "Mrs. Coleman will vacate the marital residence within 7 days and shall not receive spousal support. This court strongly advises the parties to maintain distance." Mary trembled. She left the courtroom in a haze, unsure of where she would go. In the hallway, Richard brushed past her without so much as a sideways glance. The day Mary had to leave arrived grimly, a cold, overcast morning. She shuffled around the house, packing what few personal items she could claim. Most of the possessions, furniture, electronics, precious keepsakes, belonged to Richard on paper, thanks to the judge's ruling. Mary felt each moment sharpen the realization that this was no longer her home. By noon, 2 burly movers hired by Richard showed up at the door with a truck. They were tasked not to load her things into the truck. Mary had so little anyway, but to rearrange the furniture in the house and move Mary's boxes to the curb. Mary hovered near the front windows, tears sliding down her cheeks as she clutched a half-empty suitcase. "Where do you want these boxes?" one mover asked. "Just set them by the driveway," Richard replied coolly. "She can decide what to do with them once she's out." Mary walked to the living room, feeling the prickle of humiliation. "Richard," she said in a trembling voice, "I have nowhere to go. Can't you give me an extra week or something?" He shot her a scathing look. "I gave you 7 days. That's more than you deserve." She swallowed a knot of anger and shame. The first mover strode by carrying a box labeled Mary's clothes. The second mover started removing her personal knickknacks from the shelves. It was a bizarre reversal of fortune, once the lady of the house, now a guest being kicked out. The doorbell rang. Richard walked to open it, expecting perhaps another delivery or a helper. Instead, Mary's mother, Eleanor, swept in, an expensive handbag over her shoulder. She wore heavy makeup and a fur-trimmed coat, despite the mild weather, looking every bit the furious matriarch. "Where is my daughter?" Eleanor snapped. She spotted Mary by the stairs, tear-streaked, surrounded by boxes. "Mary!" She hurried over and enveloped her daughter in a tight embrace. "Oh, my poor baby, look at you." Mary buried her face in Eleanor's shoulder, sobbing. "Mom, it's all gone. I have nothing." "I know," Eleanor cooed, stroking Mary's hair. Then she turned blazing eyes on Richard. "You did this! You're throwing her onto the street like trash!" Richard stood stiffly, folding his arms. "She destroyed our marriage. The judge's decision was clear. I'm merely following through." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "You smug bastard," she hissed. "Mary made mistakes, but she's still your wife." "Ex-wife," Richard corrected coldly. Eleanor raised her chin. "You took everything from her. You manipulated the courts. You humiliated her." She reached into her coat pocket with trembling fingers. "I should have known you'd turn into this vengeful snake." Something about her posture made Richard's eyes narrow. She was rummaging for something in her pocket. "Eleanor," he warned, "don't do anything stupid." Suddenly, Eleanor whipped out a small canister. Before Richard could step back, she pressed the nozzle, spraying a burst of pepper spray directly at him. "Ah!" Richard yelled, staggering back, eyes burning. He tried to shield himself with an arm, but the liquid had already spattered across his face. The movers froze, dumbfounded. Mary gasped, clutching the banister. "Mom, no!" she cried. Eleanor brandished the pepper spray canister like a weapon. "That's what you get! You think you can bully my daughter? Let's see you bully me!" She sprayed again, but Richard managed to dodge most of it, though more droplets stung his skin. Richard coughed, his vision blurred. Enraged, he groped for his phone. "You're insane!" he shouted, blinking furiously. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Eleanor shrilled, brandishing the canister. "I'm not afraid of you." Mary scrambled toward her mother, tears flowing. "Mom, stop! You're making it worse!" But Eleanor, fired up with righteous fury, refused to back down. The two movers exchanged looks, uncertain whether to intervene. Within minutes, sirens sounded outside the house. Two police cruisers pulled up with lights flashing. Officers rushed up the walkway, having received a frantic 911 call about an assault. They found Richard blinking away tears, face red and inflamed, while Eleanor still clutched the pepper spray canister. Mary stood between them, distraught. "Everyone calm down," one officer barked, stepping between them. "Ma'am, drop the pepper spray, now!" Eleanor glared, but eventually tossed the canister aside. She pointed at Richard. "He's throwing my daughter on the street. She's got nowhere else to go." "Ma'am, that doesn't give you the right to assault him," the officer snapped. He looked at Richard's reddened eyes. "Sir, do you need paramedics?" Richard wiped his face with the back of his hand. "No," he grunted. "I just want them both gone from my property." The second officer questioned the movers, who confirmed that they'd seen the older woman spray Richard without physical provocation. The first officer turned a stern gaze on Eleanor. "You assaulted him with pepper spray. That's an offense. We're going to need you to come with us." "You have no right to arrest me," Eleanor protested, but the officer produced handcuffs. "Mom, oh God!" Mary whispered, tears choking her voice. "I'm so sorry." Eleanor didn't back down. "I won't let you do this to my daughter." She thrashed, but the officer secured her arms behind her back. Another policeman gently but firmly took Mary's arm, guiding her toward the door. "Ma'am," he said quietly to Mary, "you're trespassing now. If your ex-husband wants you out, he has a court order. Let's go." Mary's sobs racked her body. She watched her mother being led away in cuffs, still spewing curses at Richard. Then, the officer escorted Mary outside. She saw one cruiser with its back door open, waiting for Eleanor. Her mother, defiant, refused to look at Mary as they put her in the car. Mary's entire life had imploded into a single humiliating scene. The officer eyed Mary sympathetically. "Is there somewhere you can stay?" "No," Mary whispered. "I have no house, no money." The policeman grimaced. "We'll have to ask you to leave the premises. If you refuse, we have grounds to detain you for trespassing. Do you have a friend who can pick you up?" She shook her head mutely. tears sliding down her cheeks. Richard remained near the doorway, still stinging from the pepper spray but determined. Officer, if she has no place to go, that's her problem. I've complied with all legal mandates. She's supposed to vacate today. Mary stood on the front step, shivering as though a freezing wind had blown in, though the day was only mildly cold. She turned toward Richard with pleading eyes. Please, she said, I don't have my phone or a car or— Not my concern, he retorted. One of the movers set Mary's boxes down on the driveway. The second nodded to Richard. We'll be heading out, boss. That's everything you asked us to move. Thank you, Richard said, handing them their payment. Mary watched, numb, as the moving truck pulled away. Her mother's car was still in the driveway, but the keys were presumably with Eleanor, who was now in a patrol car heading for the station. Another policeman came back from the yard, gesturing for Mary to leave. Ma'am, he said gently, I'm sorry, you have to go now. She turned back one last time, gazing at Richard with an expression of utter despair. I did love you once, she said brokenly. I never thought it would end like this. He stared at her, eyes cold as stone. Neither did I. And with that, Mary stepped off the porch, feeling the final blow of a door slamming behind her, Richard shutting it with a grim finality. She stood in the yard, tears trickling as the police cruisers drove away with her mother in one, leaving Mary alone on the sidewalk, a couple of boxes stacked at the curb. Mary's last glimmer of hope was Clifford, her son, who had been everything to her before she tainted their bond with secrets and threats. Maybe if she could reach him somehow, he'd give her a couch to sleep on or a ride to a cheap motel. Her heart pounded with the sliver of possibility. She rummaged through one of the boxes for her old phone, which was out of battery. She found a charger, plugged it into a battered power bank, and turned it on, waiting anxiously for it to boot. Then she dialed Clifford's number with trembling fingers. Mom? His voice answered, sounding both surprised and guarded. Mary's throat felt tight. Cliff, please, I don't know where to go. Your grandma just got arrested for pepper spraying your dad, and now I'm on the street. She heard his breath hitch. What the? Are you serious? Yes, she said in a fragile whisper. He evicted me. Can I come stay with you just for one night? I'll figure something else out tomorrow. A long silence. She pressed the phone closer, heart pounding. Mom, I can't, Clifford said at last, sounding miserable. I'm sorry, but I don't trust you anymore, and Dad's paying my tuition. He's helping me with rent, and I just can't get involved. Mary let out a quiet sob. I'm still your mother. Were you thinking about that when you slept with guys my age? He fired back, voice rising. Were you thinking about me when you threatened to cut me off if I told Dad? I love you, but I can't help you right now. Her lip trembled. So that's it? I'm just alone? A shaky exhale from Clifford. Look, maybe later I can see if Dad will calm down and we can figure out a solution. But for now, I'm sorry. She heard the beep of the call disconnecting. Tears slid down her cheeks as she lowered the phone. Clifford, the last shred of hope, had turned her away. She was well and truly alone. With her boxes stacked near the curb, Mary sank to a seat on the cold concrete, hugging herself. She watched the front windows of the house that used to be hers, the lights glowing from inside. If she strained her ears, she could almost hear the faint echo of a piano scale she once taught. The irony sliced through her heart like a blade. Her mother was likely headed to a jail cell for assault, and Mary had no clue how to bail her out. She had no money, no job, no home, and apparently no child who would stand by her.